These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host, Bill Monty.
Well, Thanksgiving 2024 has just passed, so that means South Florida is now in the throes of the holiday season. If, like me, you grew up in South Florida, you know that the holiday celebrations might be a little bit different down here than maybe the rest of the country. We certainly don't get the cold weather. We don't have any jingle bells. We don't have any sleigh bells or any other things like that happening. But we do have a lot of sand, we have a lot of beach, we have a lot of sunshine, and we have a lot of good times. We might do a little more margarita drinking than hot cocoa. But that's just growing up in South Florida. And now that the holidays are here officially, got me thinking about the holidays of yesterday and how we celebrated them back then. Certainly maybe a little bit different than we do now with all the technology. And I think we've lost something very special from what it used to be. I put the question out there to some friends and a couple of social media groups, what they remember about celebrations yesterday and yesteryear. And a lot of people replied, which I really appreciate. Keep listening to the end of this episode because I have a special offer for you that I think you'll enjoy and I hope you'll participate in. One of the things that people did mention a lot was the Winterfest Boat Parade in Fort Lauderdale. Now, I realize that might be more of a Broward County-centric type of activity. I don't know that Miami-Dade had anything like that. I do think Palm Beach County, maybe they didn't back then, but they have some type of boat parade now. And it just seems natural, doesn't it, for us to have that kind of parade? I mean, come on. Especially Fort Lauderdale, we're the Venice of America. Yeah, a lot of people mentioned that. I certainly don't remember that, and maybe the reason is there wasn't a boat parade per se until 1971. That was when a group of 20 people began the parade by decorating yachts. I say, lovely, let's put a Christmas tree and start a parade, shall we? But they decorated yachts and they started sailing them on the Intracoastal Waterway. About 10 years later, in 1981, the Winterfest Festival was created around the boat parade's popularity, informal though it might have been. 2 years later, in 1983, the first Winterfest theme was a tropical fantasy, and participating boats added props and animation to interpret that theme. And in 1984, the parade went national. Willard Scott, anyone remember Willard Scott, the meteorologist from NBC's Today Show? Well, he was the first Grand Marshal for the Winterfest Boat Parade. In 1987, making it even bigger, was the parade being featured in Bob Hope's Christmas special, which was the first network TV special produced in Broward County. In 1988, it all got made official when the not-for-profit organization Winterfest Incorporated was formed. And it's just gotten bigger and bigger every year since. It's huge now. It's always the second Saturday in December, and somewhere right around New Year's, they show it on Channel 7, the boat parade. And you got to get your tickets way in advance. It's absolutely jam-packed down there. So if you don't feel like fighting the crowd, you will get a chance to see it on TV. And so many people mentioned that as being one of the big celebrations that they recall growing up in South Florida. Certainly one of them also back in the day was driving around all the neighborhoods. Because back then, it seemed like almost every neighborhood went out of their way to work together to create huge Christmas light displays. Papers, the Miami Herald and the Sun Sentinel and the Fort Lauderdale News, they would all print where you could drive and see the lights and best nights to do it. Sometimes the lines and the traffic would be amazing around it. There were a couple of families I know in Broward County that finally just donated their lights to a display where the Guitar Hotel now stands with the Seminole Hard Rock Casino. Back then it was a much smaller display and kind of a small Christmas-themed park. That was one of the things I enjoyed most, when my dad would pack us into the car and we would go out to look at all the houses so brightly, beautifully decorated. We'd have Christmas music playing in the car. You'd pray it would be a little bit chilly that night. Generally it wasn't. It was mostly just kind of hot and humid. We're going to see Christmas lights in our tank tops and shorts. I know for me as a kid, Christmas began when we went to the Hollywood Mall to Sears, or we went to Searstown in Fort Lauderdale and got the Sears catalog. That was somewhere around September, if I recall correctly, August or September. And my brother and I would sit at the dining room table and start poring over all the images of the toys that we wanted. We'd circle them, we'd highlight them, we'd write our list. And that's how we prepared early. As we got closer to Christmas, somewhere around the Thanksgiving holiday, we knew it was getting real when my father would take us over to the Goodyear store, or Firestone maybe. Wouldn't be going to get tires or an oil change or a tune-up or anything else. We'd be going to pick up that Christmas album. We had that whole series for the longest time. I still have some of them around here. I think I might pull some out and listen to them this year. But you'd get that new album. There'd be Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and Sammy Davis and Doris Day and Barbara Streisand, Nat King Cole and Johnny Mathis, Andy Williams, the new Christy Minstrels, some guy singing opera called Richard Tucker. I loved those albums. I'd play them all through the Christmas season. They meant Christmas to me. Music was really a big part of my life. I was a member of the church and the church choir, so certainly growing up, I was involved that way. That's part of my Christmas memories growing up in South Florida. Now, when I was younger, up through about middle school, I guess, every Christmas we drove up to Arkansas to see my grandmothers who lived in Little Rock. So I didn't experience a lot of Christmases in South Florida during that time. By the time I entered high school, we were staying down here most of the time because that's where we wanted. My brother was older than I. He certainly didn't want to be driving up there for Christmas. He wanted to be with his friends and his girlfriend and whatever. And I kind of wanted the same thing. I remember one Christmas in particular. It was December of 1974. I went to MacArthur High School in Hollywood, and I was in the chorus, and we had a special group of singers called Madrigals. And the Madrigals was an a cappella group, so we didn't need piano or musicians or anything like that. We sang beautiful harmonies, and we did all these kind of songs, old Italian songs and Christmas carols. And that particular December of 1974, our group of Madrigals and some of the other kids from the chorus decided to go out Christmas caroling. I know it's hard to believe, especially if you're listening to this and you're younger, but people used to go Christmas caroling in the neighborhoods. I can remember them coming by our house when I was growing up. Sometimes it was the neighbors or sometimes it was a church or something, but it was thrilling to see a group of 3 or 4 or 8 people standing outside your door singing some Christmas songs. Sometimes they were really great, sometimes not as good. But it was sort of the spirit of the whole thing that made it worthwhile. That particular year, as we went out Christmas caroling that night in Hollywood and Hollywood Hills, which was at that time kind of a richer part of town, we would go from house to house and we'd start singing. Now, we were an award-winning group. We really were very, very good. And people were thrilled to hear us. And we went to one house where they invited us in. They were having a huge Christmas party, lavish, big house. The men were wearing suits. The women were in pearls and diamonds and dresses. And we fit right in because our outfit for Madrigals was the guys were in tuxedos. The girls were in these long dresses, mint green, if I recall correctly. So we fit right in. They brought us in to sing some songs in the house at the party. They offered us food. They gave us money. And it turns out that the owner of the house was the brother of Richard Tucker, the man I mentioned earlier who was on those Christmas albums. And that was kind of cool, to meet him. I kind of hoped Mr. Tucker would be there. He wasn't, but his brother was. So close enough, right? I still remember that night. It was a lot of fun. We had never done anything like that before, and we never did anything like that again afterwards. We kept growing up and going our separate ways, and things changed. Then we had our own traditions as we got older, and then got married, and we had children, and there became even newer traditions. And this is where my offer, my friends, to you comes in. If you go to our webpage, talesfromsouthflorida.com, and you scroll about halfway down to the Contact Us portion, there's a green banner that says Leave Me a Message. If you click on that, it will take you to a page where you can record a message that will come directly to me. Please do that. Record a message about one of your favorite holiday memories growing up in South Florida. You don't have to include your name if you don't want to. I'd love it if you did, because what I'd like to do is to do an episode before we get to New Year's where we hear your voice telling your story and a bunch of voices telling a bunch of stories about growing up in South Florida from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and what it was like, and kind of take us all back on that trip, another talk down memory lane. But this time, you're the ones who'll be doing the talking and doing the leading. Just remember, it's talesfromsouthflorida.com, and just click on that green banner, and please leave me a message. And your voice and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. I got to say this for legal purposes. There is no financial payout. I don't make any money doing this, this podcast. That's why I can't pay anyone for using your voice. And by leaving the voicemail on there, you are giving me permission to use it on the podcast. And as always, friends, I ask you to please like and comment and share and hit that subscribe button. It helps us grow the podcast. Got to be doing a couple of more holiday-themed episodes before we get to 2025, and I sure would like to have you be a part of it. Until next time, my friends, as always, I remind you to please be safe and be kind, and keep a little ho-ho-ho in your spirit.
These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host, Bill Monty.